Hey, what's going on, people? Happy Sunday. It is good to see everyone. Apologies for not being able to do this a couple of weeks ago. It has been, let's go a little bit more. It has been madness around here trying to work on the new book. I am facing a hard deadline right now, which is kind of madness, if I'm going to be honest with you. But need to get this book out and to the good people out in the world in order to warn about all of this stuff and talk about what's going on. We are 2 chapters out, I think, at this point. The official tally, 2 chapters out. Working on the next to last chapter. I'm currently in 1950, I think, going from, in this chapter, from 50 probably up to about 92, 93, give or take, the rise of neoliberalism and globalism, and then going from there into the current authoritarian crisis. I've been doing about 10 to 12 to 13 hours a day at this point. The book right now is scheduled to come out in October of 2022. And I need to get it done. The official date, I don't want to go ahead and jinx it, but I'll just say it. I need to get it done by January 24th. That's the focus. It's the focus. And so I got a little over a month left to get this thing done, and it is it's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. This book that I'm doing right now is easily the hardest thing that I've had to do, and I'm exhausted and trying to crunch to get this whole thing done. I appreciate everyone being so kind and supportive about it. I am learning so damn much doing this book. It has changed my viewpoint completely about politics and history, which is fun because American Rule did that as well. I think that each time that you do one of these things, it should go ahead and sort of be a fundamental upheaval of both your thoughts about reality, but whatever the subject is. And I always tell students who are working on books or have an idea about a book length project that you should expect to be a different person by the time that you're done with it. And I certainly feel that. It has changed the way that I see all of this stuff. We'll talk a little bit about that tonight, but it's been interesting. I was looking at this today, which is the outline for this next chapter. And it's really amazing how each of the things really go ahead and move through. There's like a through line into where we are now and how these things have come about. So anyway, yeah, I appreciate you all being kind and patient. I missed you all a couple of weeks ago. It is nice to be back here tonight. We have an absolute full slate of questions, really, really interesting things to talk about. As we all know, things are escalating in different ways, in different places, in different fronts. This is something that if you've been watching this, if you've been listening to the podcast, if you've been reading the books, you've known that this was coming. Again, I'll just go ahead and say that I hate that more people have been in denial about this and living in delusion about this stuff, and that this has unfortunately been written on the wall for those of us who are paying attention, those of us who care and are open to it and understanding it. We knew that a lot of this stuff was coming. Hopefully more people are going to start joining us and start thinking about this stuff critically and realistically, because we're in it. We're in it right now. And the lead up to 2022 and eventually 2024. I mean, my God, we have so much coming our way. So we have a lot of questions to get to, a lot of stuff to talk about. Before we do, cheers to you, me, all of us winning this fight. These things are always good for my soul. I hope they're good for yours. It feels good to know that we're not alone. It feels good to know that there are many of us who see what's coming, that we are engaging in solidarity. We're discussing these things. We're being mature about it. We're being realistic about it. We're being kind about it. And we're being proactive about it. So I just want to say cheers to you, cheers to me, cheers to all of us. So I'll go ahead and I'll start because there's a lot of topics that we need to get to tonight that I think are on all of our minds. So let's go ahead and start. Mo J. Long says the politicians who vote for these abortion bans also vote against gun reform, against expanding access to contraception, and against Medicaid expansion. They're forcing people into birth, branding themselves as pro-life, and this is absurd beyond belief. I'll say, first of all, to go ahead and put a marker down, draw a line in the sand. We need to be very, very clear about this. Pro-life is nothing more than a slogan. Nothing about this movement has anything to do with being supportive of a human life, of being there for people as they go through the journey of their lives. None of this stuff has anything to do with that ideology. Pro-life is a slogan that was cooked up in the right-wing think tank intellectual ecosphere. This was something that was made up to be a linguistic, rhetorical cudgel. It sounds good. I mean, how could you not be pro-life, right? And this is one of those things we've talked about a lot before. The Republican Party is so good linguistically and rhetorically. And they have always run circles around the left. It's not even been close. It's been more or less a rout. And the entire point of pro-life has nothing to do with actually being pro-life. They don't care about programs that extend lives. They don't care about healthcare that makes sure that our lives will be longer. They don't care about social programs that would make our lives better. They don't care about making sure, that even people who are giving birth are going to be able to give birth safely. Or, infant mortality has been going up and up and up. I mean, they don't care about this stuff. Whenever they're pushing guns, and we'll talk more about that tonight, it's not about protecting life. It's never been about self-defense. It's never been about those types of things. It's about control. And in this regard, when it comes to abortion, it has nothing to do with children. It has nothing to do with the product of birth. It has everything to do with the controlling of women. That's all that it is. And every means in which they can control women or control anybody, including minorities, including vulnerable populations, including LGBTQ people, they don't care. None of this has anything to do with the experience of life. It's a matter of being able to accomplish something that will put women in their place, right? That will put vulnerable populations in their place. It's never about actually following through with any of these espoused principles, because the entire point of all of this is about power and control and profit. None of it ever has anything to do with the espoused principles. And I have to tell you, in the research that I have found, this isn't just the Republican Party. This is the conservative ideology. This is the right wing. This is what they do. Nothing really matters outside of maintaining power, control, and the pursuit of profit. That's it. And it's a really disturbing thing. But unfortunately, when you kind of wrap your head around it, all of a sudden, all of these inconsistencies, all of these contradictions, all of these like oxymoronic things that are going on has absolutely nothing to do with the espoused principles, which is, of course, how a party, the Republican Party, which claims to be for small government, which claims to be for, anti-deficit, fiscally conservative, socially conservative. This is the reason Why, when they are in charge, the government balloons because they want to use that as control over people. This is why they don't give a shit about what Donald Trump does or doesn't do, because he is a cudgel, he's a weapon, a battering ram that they can use. It's why it turns out that most of them are hypocrites. It's because they don't actually care about these things. They're effective. They've been tested. They've been designed. These are more or less designed cudgels and weapons and rhetorical devices that have been cooked up in think tanks and with right-wing intellectuals. None of this has anything to do with what is espoused. The moment that you start realizing that, you're kind of free. You kind of start to say, you know what, I get this now. I'm not chasing you through these halls of mirrors. I'm not trying to figure out what the difference is between what you say you believe and the things that you do. And when you start to realize that, when you realize it's only about power, it all just sort of opens up. It all just sort of blooms. And you start to go back through history and you start to go through what they've done. And you suddenly realize, as Todd just said in the chat, you can't unsee it. It's always there. It's about control. It's about throwing control out on other people so that you have control and you can have power and you can have profit. So the whole pro-life thing, it's not real. And it's never been real. If you actually go back through the history of the Republican Party, and this was fun, I found this today, Barry Goldwater, who of course was a Republican nominee for president against Lyndon Johnson, one of the farthest right Republican candidates of all time. His wife, she worked with Planned Parenthood. Like that's in the very beginning. Like that thing was solved. It was a consensus. This whole thing at this point is just an effective cudgel. It's a way to go in and divide people in order to win power and fundraise. It's just about control. Pro-life has no truth to it. There's no reason whatsoever to pay attention to these slogans. And the Republican Party that we have now has done us an incredible favor in making it obvious that they don't really give a shit about any of this stuff. Now, with this, Fifi asked, what is the political strategy behind SCOTUS dismantling this social construct first? So this is a really, really big question. And in a way, it's something that we have to wrestle with and we kind of have to think about. And we have to spend a little bit of time as we're, revolting in horror to what has happened. And we're going to talk a lot about some of this stuff tonight because there's some really disturbing stuff that we have to really get into. And we really have to start looking into the future and where things are going and what the possibilities are. Okay. So why is the Supreme Court doing this right now? And, for the longest time, the Republican Party, whenever the lights were off, whenever they weren't out in public, whenever they weren't talking at fundraisers, whenever they weren't talking to constituents, they would sort of nod and nudge each other and wink and be like, we're not going to get rid of Roe v. Wade. That would be absolute madness to get rid of Roe v. Wade. It's everything that we've ever wanted. It's everything, it gets us votes, it wins us elections, it gets us fundraising, it keeps the base motivated and ready to go. And, I've talked to my fair share of Republicans who have said just that. They're like, my God, it would be ridiculous. It'd be like killing the golden goose. So there's the question. Why now? Why are they going after Roe v. Wade and a woman's right to choose now? And when you start going through the evidence, when you start thinking about these things, there's kind of an answer that becomes very, very glaring, up in glowing lights. And the answer is they finally believe that they can. That's it. They've reached the point where they can do it. They have so stalked the judiciary, top to bottom, and they have created such a situation in which they have taken over local government, regional government, state government. They've been able to go through there in an incredible project that has gone on now for decades. And they've been able to go in with people like the Federalist Society and people like Mitch McConnell. They've gone in and systematically taken these things over, which means they've gotten these areas that are going to uphold these things. At this point, they are going to be able to realize a part of the country that will be different from the rest of the country, red versus blue, if you will, which unfortunately is something we're going to have to talk about more and more, because this is the project that they've been carrying out. They want to get particularly Republican states. They want to get the strongholds, right? Your Alabamas, your Mississippi, your Texas. They want to get a hold of those, and they want to keep them, obviously. And then they want to go into the Republican-leaning states, Georgia, if you will. And they want to go in and they want to make sure that those are in their camp. Because the entire Republican project at this point is unviable. And we've talked about this before. They can't win around the country. It can't happen. This Republican Party is not going to pick up blue states, right? In fact, they're going to lose more and more of these quote unquote purple states. The best that they can do is to draw a line and say, we're over here and you're over there. That's the best that they can do. That's the best the Republican Party can do at this point. And once they're able to do that, and if they keep the Supreme Court as sort of a backstop against progressive legislation or any progress in general, and basically as a weapon to roll back civil liberties and the such, they'll do that because that's the long game. But right now, what is occurring is they're saying, you know what, these are ours, those are yours. And we're going to see more and more of a difference between red states and blue states. And as we see that go back and forth, these culture wars that we're living through, they're only going to accelerate. They're only going to get worse. And as those things get worse, the things that you and I talk about, the things that we keep an eye on, that radicalism, that violence, that oppression, that's only going to increase. So I think the reason that the Republican Party is going after this now, why they're going ahead and pulling the trigger, is because they don't have much of a choice anymore. They're historically unpopular, they're electorally unviable, and they don't have much of a choice. They've created this project, and it's one of those situations. You go ahead and do it or you don't, or you lose possibly everything. So I think at this point, the idea that they would go ahead and strike down Roe v. Wade, that seems like it's something that they would think is a good move for them. It seems like as of right now, this is probably strategically where they will probably go. Now, the question that goes with that, and this is the next question. Chris C. says, and it's a two-part question. One, is when Trump's Supreme Court overturns Roe, how likely is it that we will see George Floyd-style marches across America? And two, in the wake of the Rittenhouse verdict and all the other anti-protester laws, how likely is violence at these marches? So that's a wonderful, real, important question. What are the chances that we'll see protests? We absolutely will. I think you can go ahead and carve that into stone. The big question is what happens with those protests, because that is one of those moments. And I wrote about this on the Substack. We now basically live in an America that isn't so much as a shared society anymore as it is a broken society that rubs against each other. We're going to have one flashpoint after another. We're going to have trials. We're going to have cultural moments. We're going to have controversies and scandals. We're going to have one thing after another that pushes us closer and closer into some sort of chaos or violence, and everything is going to be, some sort of a flashpoint. If you want to know how this would work, go back into the 1960s and the 1970s, and you can see a pretty good idea of what something like this might look like. Now, the question is, and this is hard, and this is something rough to talk about. The question is, what are those protests and what are those marches going to amount to? So, I'm talking about this stuff. I write about it. I tweet about it. And one thing that I've noticed is that there is a big divide between people who are sort of worried about the country overall and people who are very much just worried about their own regional situation, right? People who are like, well, you know what, I'm not really worried at about what's going on in the South. I mean, those people have chosen to live in the South. I'm not really worried about what's going on in Texas or whatever, as long as things are fine with me. So part of that atomization and part of that sort of separation from so-called red and blue states, you're probably going to see a lot of people who are going to protest, a lot of people who are going to go out into marches and these actions to show their displeasure about what's going on with Roe v. Wade. The question is, are they going to go out there and are they going to stay out there for a while? Or is it more or less going to be an expression of who they are? Right? More or less going out and saying, I'm the type of person who's going to march because Roe v. Wade has been struck down. Or am I going to go out and I'm going to stay in the streets until there is something that is done about this injustice? Now, the current state of America says that's sort of a jump ball. We're not sure what that's going to be. We don't know what those protests and movements are going to be like. Are we going to see people who become radicalized based on this? And they say, you know what, we need a major structural, political, social change. And that's a big thing. If we were to have some sort of a movement that says, you know what, the corruption that we have experienced is so bad, we need sweeping reform and change, that's a big deal. And that could be one of the things where the Republicans, they go too far and they push things in that direction. But if more people are like, you know what, abortion is going to be legal in my state, good luck to the idiots over there across the river or over there across the border, that gets rough. That gets really, really rough because you could see a lot of people who they go out, they do a march, they protest, and then they go home. Or there is also a problem where we have now made it possible for people, I don't know, to pick up a semi-automatic rifle, go out, carry it around, and claim self-defense as they kill people. You've also got states, a lot of them red states, actually all of them red states now that we're talking about it, where, somebody gets a wild hair, they can just drive through the protest and kill a bunch of people, and that's self-defense itself. You also have other states like Florida, where if you get caught protesting and you're protesting something that the state doesn't want you to protest, all of a sudden you can't get loans, you can't go to school, you can't do anything. So they have created quite a little situation. The question is, are we going to let that happen? Personally, because I am hopeful, and we'll talk more about that later, about why I'm hopeful. I think this is a step too far. I think the Republican Party, and this is one of the things that they do, I think they're going too far. And I think they're going to shake this country awake. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be great. It doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. There's a struggle coming. And I have to tell you, Roe v. Wade is the perfect place for them to start, because it is this severing in between of open society, and it'll make their people so incredibly happy. It will give them momentum, and it will go ahead and it will divide the country up into red and blue states. And you're going to watch the state legislatures just line up, because I tweeted about this the other day. The states are taking more and more power and leverage because the federal government is terrified to act. We could go ahead and just fight through this, but the federal government has no desire to do this. They don't have a lot of desire about sending troops into places like Kennedy did, into Alabama. That isn't really on the table anymore, particularly because there's a bunch of guns out there and there's a bunch of people out there who are ready to fight off federal troops. So you can watch Roe v. Wade go down. You can watch gay marriage go down. You can watch civil rights, what's left of them, go down. Next thing you know, and I've talked about this before, you're looking at children going back to work. You're looking at people working. Well, they're already working more than 40 hours a day already. God, let's go ahead and make them work 80 to 90. Let's make them work 7 days a week. Let's take away all regulations altogether, which is, something that a lot of these states would want to do. You got to put a stake in the ground and you got to say, There is some shit I will not eat. It starts here. You cannot treat women like this. You cannot treat human beings like this. You cannot do this. I think that we're going to overcome this thing. But do not get me wrong. I think this is a massive, massive moment. And this is part of what I've been talking about for a while. Julia says, someone may have already asked this, but do you really think Trump will run in 2024? And what is the likelihood of him winning if we don't get our act together? I'll say this. If Trump runs, he wins the nomination. If he's healthy, he'll run. And I think we're looking at probably, depending upon who gets the nomination on the Democratic side, whether Biden goes again, depending upon who gets it, I think the 2016, the 2020 elections give us a pretty good idea of how those things are going to work. At that point, I think it's kind of a coin flip, unfortunately. I have a lot of thoughts on what's going to happen possibly in 2022. 2024, things could change so much. Oh my God. I mean, who knows how many crises we're going to have? Who knows how many, we could be in a war by then. We could have so much happen. We could have an economic crisis by then. So much can change. But if he is healthy enough to run, he'll run. And he'll win the nomination. But I think it's a coin flip at that point, which is terrible. I think that's right. I think even if he was prosecuted for something at this point, he runs. Yeah, I think that's coming, and that's a coin flip depending upon what happens. Wendy says, "Do you watch Succession?" I do. If so, I'm interested to hear your take on the latest season. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything for Succession. And don't do it in the chat either, because there's some interesting stuff that is happening in this season. And I'm going to talk around it. I think the reason that Wendy asked this question is because something has happened in this, I believe it's the third season. First of all, I think it's the best show on TV right now. I think it is a perfect encapsulation of how wealth and power corrodes the individual and destroys them and destroys everyone around them. I think it's, I think that's exactly right. After we're done with Bourbon Talk tonight, I'm going to go watch the new Succession. I think it's a really, really good example of how wealth and power corrodes. And it's also very funny. Very, very funny. Something has happened in this new season. Some people have reached out and they've been like, have you been watching this thing? Have you been keeping track of it? And absolutely I have. I'll just say this. The show understands the relationship between wealth, crisis, and fascism better than anything else out there. Most people do not understand that relationship. They don't understand how power and crisis and fascism go together because we haven't been taught that. And every single day that I work on this book, I'm just more and more, my mind is just blown by what bullshit we have been taught about fascism and how it works. And the reason why we're not taught about how fascism and authoritarianism works is because so many elements of American society and history go hand in hand with fascism and authoritarianism, which makes it all the more possible that we could possibly experience it here in this country, which is that the wealthy, when they reach a point of crisis and they reach a point of desperation, they look over here and they look at fascists and they say, you got it going on. You're going to make people go to work. You're going to make the socialists and the communists go away. You're going to make society work, or else you're going to, make the streets run red with blood. They love that. It's perfect. It actually goes ahead and takes the desires of the capitalist class, and it says to them, hey, you don't have to feel bad about, wanting to crack some skulls or kill some people. All you have to do is let it go. Just let it go. And once you let it go, things will work so much better. People don't have to vote. People don't have to have civil liberties. The only thing that matters is that they show up to the factory, they show up to their job, and they shut up and they quit protesting. And capitalists love that. They love getting together with fascists. It works that way. They love it. It's perfect for them. John asks, did you see how the parents of the child shooter up here in Michigan fled when the law started to look at them for negligence? What are your thoughts on charging parents who don't keep their weapons secured from their children? First of all, awful. I know that I'm not the only one in this chat, and I know that this is going to sound nearly cliche. I'm so tired of these shootings, and they're so tragic, and they're so awful. And our ability to watch these things happen and continue to happen and just go unanswered is so repulsive. It makes me feel ill. It's repulsive. This whole situation, I think, is especially rough. I think we're going to talk about this. We're going to tape the new podcast tomorrow for Tuesday. As of right now, we got Chauncey DeVega coming on, which having Chauncey on is always the best. So I'm excited about that. But the shooting, I think, is really indicative of something that is happening. And I think on top of us having a gun culture, which I think is a big problem, obviously, it's an American problem in which we have sold guns to everybody as a means of protecting white patriarchal supremacy. It's never been about self-defense. It's always been about giving you a weapon that says, I can take down so many more than me. Plus, also, if you don't do what I want you to do, if politics doesn't work the way that I want it to, if the government doesn't work the way that I want it to, well, maybe I'll just grab my gun and I'll go down there and I'll show them what I do to tyrants, right? And in this case, we obviously have a group of people. They're not well. That's a problem. But on top of that, they fetishize weapons and the violence that come with weapons. There is, of course, the right-wing part of it. There's the Trump MAGA part of it. There's the frustration of not being able to do more, or the alienation and the atomization that comes along with hypercapitalism where we are now. And it's also just the lack of care about other people. Just the lack of care for other people. The things that the mother was saying, like you need to hide behind this ammunition and all that, it's so gross. And I think everything that I've seen, they should absolutely be charged. And I think people should be charged in these situations. If you're a gun owner and you're in a household with kids, you got to be safe. I mean, I've said this before. I'm a gun owner because I had guns handed down to me, passed down from my dad. And, I know a lot of people who are gun owners who look at all this shit and they're like, my God, this is repulsive. And, that somebody brought up the Massey family photo, which is just like everybody holding guns. It's an act. It's an act. It is all a put upon thing. They are pretending to be something. They want to pretend that they're revolutionaries or that they're tough or that they're tougher on tyrants or whatever. It's so disgusting. It's so awful. And it's so bad. It's so disgusting. And obviously there's a sickness in this country. And I wish that there wasn't, but there is a sickness in this country. And we have to overcome it. And what's more, And what's more, I just want to put this final bow on it. What's more, these people would themselves be happier if they didn't suffer from this sickness. This problem inflicts pain on them. It inflicts pain on everybody else. This paranoia, this insecurity, this authoritarianism, it is a disease, and it's so, so bad, and it's so riven through this country. It's got to be fixed. Chelsea says, do you feel like the negligence on the part of public schools in school shooting directly ties to the growing movement of dismantling public ed as a whole? Absolutely. As more pros move on for better funded schools and industries, I'm concerned competent process and talent will dwindle. So first of all, yeah, absolutely. Actually, I got a quote here that I found in my research. There's no way I'm going to be able to find this, by the way. No, I wouldn't buy a gun now. This is my current chapter. There's no way I'm going to find this quote in here. It was funny. Somebody said in here that it was one of these citizen groups. And so what ends up happening is while civil rights is starting to really take off, you have all these citizen groups that end up I already moved past it. I don't know where it's at in here. But basically, these people say back in the 1960s, they say, you know what matters is in our public schools, we should only be teaching obedience and love of America, right? That's all we should be teaching, if that sounds familiar, right? And they actually end up saying, they say, all of the smartest teachers, all of the most talented teachers, all of those people, you don't need them. You should spend your money just, getting really, really loyal, patriotic teachers, which is where we're at now. They want to go ahead and make sure that nobody goes into teaching who could possibly ever want to change anything. They want to get people in these positions who are just going to teach the conventional stuff. This is part of the reason why a couple of years ago, they're like, let's give all the teachers guns, right? And then in other situations, I work at a place right now at a university where you're allowed to carry guns on campus, but professors can't. Isn't that weird? It's really strange. It's almost like they're trying to create a certain type of environment. And the reason that they're trying to do this is because they're trying to make education just an absolute desolated landscape. They want to create a place where people go in and they get taught propaganda, they get taught indoctrinating materials, and they go ahead and they move any liberal, leftist, free-thinking person out of that space, no matter how educated or how much of an expert that they are. And the reason that they want to do that is because they want control of education. And this is something that our media does such a bad job covering, and our politicians do such a bad job understanding. They treat this as if it's an actual concern. They're like, oh my God, these people are so worried about the education of their kids. That's not what they're worried about. They want to make sure that their kids go to school and they don't learn anything that could possibly change them or make them question anything. And then on top of it, they're doing it politically. Deep down, they know that this is political. They know what they're doing is they're jockeying for political power. It has nothing to do with actual terror, right? They're not actually afraid of this stuff. Like there's a couple of them, of course, that are like really, really paranoid. They've been listening to right-wing talking points for a very long time, but most of them are just jockeying for power. So what ends up happening, and Todd got it right here in the chat, which is that totalitarianism inevitably replaces people. And it brings in people who are more than willing to lick the boots and carry the party line. So they have no interest in keeping around people who are actually, caring about this. They want to push those people out, let them go find other jobs, which is what they've done in all facets of public education. Because what they want to do is they want to demolish public education, which has been the plan since desegregation. They want to go ahead, destroy public education, turn it into a privatized industry. That way the government can't come in and say, you know what, I think white and black kids should be in the same classroom. That has been their plan from the beginning. McConnell is a worm. Love that. He is a worm. The incredible amount of damage that Mitch McConnell has done is incredible. Just way up at the top of the most damage that has ever been done by an individual in government. Probably not number one, but way up there. McConnell's worm. I saw your tweet about gun culture being an implicit threat, and it feels strangely right. What is that all about? Again, guns are the major extension of white supremacy. Whites have always been able to oppress other cultures, which usually outnumber them. And if you think about colonialism, right? Think about just a generic European ship full of white people during the age of discovery. It's not really discovery. Going across the ocean, landing on another continent, and being just supremely outnumbered by a civilization that already exists, right? What do they have going for them? Well, one, they have the hope that the people who live there will welcome them so that they can destroy them from the inside out, but also usually firearms. They can go in and shoot people and take the place over. In this case, it is the weapon of choice in order to carry out the will of the minority, which is always what this country has been about. It's the white supremacist patriarchal will of the minority. It's the ability to go in and say, you know, if you don't do what we want you to do, we will kill you. And we have the means of doing that. And we have the will to do that, which is one of the terrifying parts of this whole Rittenhouse thing, which is, you went in and did this. Now you can just go into any situation, particularly if it's politically charged, carry a gun and say, I was worried about my safety, which is what always happens because white people are always worried about their safety because the white supremacist paranoia means that they can do anything that they can possibly do. All right. Next up. In fascism now, I'm embarrassed to admit this, but my whole family is QAnon pilled. What can you do to save them? Can anything save them? First of all, the QAnon thing is obviously fascinating for a lot of different reasons. The fact that, and I wrote about this on Substack, it's infected the Republican Party and it has hidden itself. They have started, this is a cardigan. It's a cardigan. It's a tiny bit chilly. It's a robe or a velvet jacket. I do not own a velvet jacket. I have a flannel robe. I can recommend robes to everybody. Get through the winter. So QAnon, obviously, I wrote about it on Substack. It has infected the body of the Republican Party and the right wing, and it has gone in. It has shed the name QAnon. They don't even have to say it anymore, and they now hold that. They just hold that belief without even being able to say that it's QAnon, right? To go ahead and try and bring somebody back from QAnon, and this is one of the important parts of all of it. And we talk about this a lot on these live streams and on the podcast. You have to reject the traditional political narrative. Right? The traditional political narrative, red versus blue, Democrat versus Republican, it creates heroes and villains and allows you not to have a real understanding of what has happened. It's much easier to look at class. It's much easier to look at how power and oppression have been used. In this case, in order to bring back somebody from QAnon, all you have to do is abandon the trench warfare that conventional type of history or understanding creates, because what has occurred is that divide that conventional history doesn't leave room for actual explanations of what has happened in this country. And so what ends up happening is you have to create your own reality in order to make those things make sense, in order to make Donald Trump make sense, in order to make what has happened with the Republican Party make sense. What you have to do is you have to create this grand narrative of conspiracy theories and this alternate reality with evil conspiracies and satanic actions and all of this stuff. It is so much actually, well, it's not easier because it's complicated, but it's so much more necessary to talk about deindustrialization, free trade, globalization, hypercapitalism. And once you start talking about those things, you move away from the sinister good versus evil narratives that goes ahead and makes QAnon real. So talk to the people about power. Talk to them about real history. American Rules helps some people. I've been hearing from people over the last couple of months that they've been giving people the paper back, and it's actually helped get people back from Trumpism and from QAnon. Like, because when you start looking at the actual history, it makes sense. Right? It actually makes so much more sense when you look at what actually happened as opposed to going down these roads. Uncle Thomas said, do I think China is a threat? I don't think China is a threat in the way that the military and our politicians are trying to make it into a threat. It's an economic competitor. It's also an oppressive, totalitarian, technological dystopia. I think it's problematic how they treat people in the system that they've created, but I don't think that they're ready to go to war with us. I think that's absurd. I think that we have a lot of politicians and a lot of media in this country who are desperate for a new Cold War, and they're trying to create one out of whole cloth. Now, do I think that China is trying to replace us as the major power economically and politically? Yeah, but they're not going to bomb us. That's bullshit. I don't think that's real. But I think they're also problematic. And I think the things that they have done, both to the Uyghurs, but also to their population writ large, I think that we're more than ready to do that. I think we're more than ready to bring over that technology. And we've shown that. They went ahead and imported all of the technology that they've used for the oppression of their people. We want it, and we can't wait to get a hold of us and the British. So do I think China is a threat? I think they are trying to replace us economically and politically, for sure. But I do not think that they're planning on bombing us or going to war with us. If anybody's going to go to war in this new Cold War, it's us. And the reason is because the American empire is falling. And because the American empire is starting to fall apart, there are a lot of hardliners in this country, a lot of right-wingers who are going to push us further and further into the idea of this paranoid new war. So I wouldn't doubt if we had some sort of an impotent reach with China. And that's something that does scare me. Something that really, really worries me is a declining America with a militaristic sort of a push to try and regain some type of glory. That's one thing that I'm worried about. Yeah. Oh, I don't underestimate China. I think China has just absolutely figured out how to thrive in this new environment. I mean, it's really, really rough, but I don't think they're going to attack us. Our puritanical nature, we love the idea of somebody's going to hurt us, so we got to hurt them first. We love that stuff. Tim says, I've been listening to the Muckrake podcast for a while. Cheers. Thanks, Tim. Oh, I talked to Nick earlier today. Let me get out my handy dandy planner. We are going to do the Muckrake Community Holiday Party live podcast taping 7 p.m. Eastern, December 16th. December 16th, 7 p.m. Eastern, the Muckrake Community Holiday Party live stream weekender taping. I'll see how long I can get that title before it's all said and done. All you gotta do, Patreon, patreon.com/muckrake podcast. That's how you get a hold of those. Barry, yes, a planner. A planner changed my life. I never thought I was going to be a planner guy, and I don't know how I ever lived without it. I have no clue how I ever survived without a planner. What a mess. Tim, I've been listening to the Muckrake podcast for a while now, and I've noticed you've gotten more frustrated with academia. Absolutely. What's happened there, and is it related to what you talked to Nathan Coleman Lamb about? I'll say this. If you haven't heard it yet, go listen to our conversation with Nathan Coleman Lamb. It was last Tuesday, I want to say. And Nathan covers both academia, but also sports and the exploitive nature of sports. And you don't have to be a sports fan to care about this. We talked a lot about how the exploitation of capitalism is facilitated through media and culture, and how we're all complicit. And I thought it was a really, really good conversation with him. I am frustrated with academia, and I'll talk about this more in depth probably in a future episode of the podcast. But a big reason that I'm frustrated is what I would call the corporatization of academia. So after all of a sudden we start basically making college a required thing after deindustrialization, after Bill Clinton and all of the neoliberals were pushing the idea of an information economy, a technological economy, it became really, really necessary for all of us to start going to college and learning different skills. We were going to push industry to other countries, and we were going to take care of the information stuff. Well, obviously, colleges looked at that and they said, oh my God, we can make a ton of money here. And so, of course, they raised up their tuition rates, and they made sure that we paid a ton of money. They also, by the way, screwed over the government, because the government takes care of a lot of federal aid. So they pumped up the money the same way that healthcare does. And they made college prohibitively expensive. And as that happened, as that occurred, not only did that screw poor people out of their money and their opportunity to go to college and be a part of the new economy, which we're currently dealing with, but it also was very, very lucrative. And because it was lucrative, it brought in a new type of person. And the new type of person who started running these universities, they were people who were very, very interested in making a ton of money off of these things. So all of a sudden you have a corporate idea that comes into the university, and it just starts eating away at the university. All of a sudden you have tenure starts to go away, which of course involves academic freedom and security of the job. So that causes a problem. But all of a sudden you start creating this glut of a market where more and more people aren't able to get these different types of jobs that are more secure and pay more. They exploit a ton of labor. You can't even believe the type of exploitation that goes on. And I know this is going to be shocking because you all pay attention. Austerity reigns, right? There's no money for anything except for football and rock climbing walls and lazy rivers that you can float to your classes on. And it is a really absurd situation, and it's bad for us. Everyone who goes to college that can't afford it based on like parental payment of it, all of them come out with incredible amounts of debt that keep them from buying houses, investing, putting money into the economy. So it hurts the economy. Then also it goes ahead and makes sure that you're not going to be able to take chances on your job because you're so afraid of your loans and your debt that you're not going to leave one job and go to another. It's really bad. It hurts innovation. It hurts a lot of different things. You know what? I was going to go ahead and so Dorothy just said I should wait. All right, Dorothy went ahead and said I need more, so I'm going to go ahead. I was going to go until 60 minutes. Oh, we've got a couple birthdays. Oh, Kelly's birthday today. Happy birthday. That's right. Happy birthday, people. I wish I wanted a December birthday. I've got an October birthday. I like it. December birthday. Oh, it's Hackatron's birthday too. Happy birthday. Happy birthday, everybody. Thanks for coming and sharing it with us. I gotta tell you, this is Kurt Vonnegut. I was thinking about him past couple days. Had a thing that he would say, the Hoosier scribe. And what Vonnegut would say is when something is good, you should stop and you should say, oh, happy birthday to Liztron. How many birthdays do we have? My God. We got a lot of birthdays today. Good Lord. Anyway, wow. As Vonnegut would say, if this isn't nice, what is? If this isn't nice, what is? Hanging out on a Sunday. It's a little bit chilly. Happy early birthday. It's a little bit chilly outside. Sitting here at the thing of bourbon. We've got good company. We're talking about things seriously. We still have a little bit of hope. Wonderful. Happy birthday to everybody. Good for you all. Okay. I just saw somebody say, what are my thoughts on Dr. Oz? Dr. Oz is an absolute fraud and shill. It's not shocking that he's going to run for office as a Republican. That's who he is. It's who he's always been. And it's what America is at this point. It's just full of these grifters who tell people what they want to hear or sell them a false bill of goods, and then they go on their run for office. Not shocking. Not shocking at all, but Dr. Oz. I'm not even going to call him. I'm just going to call him Oz. He's running for office. Not shocking. Not shocking at all. Alaric says, you've expressed optimism that authoritarianism in the U.S. can be defeated, but when do you see that happening? Do you mean near term or after authoritarianism takes hold and falls many years later, like in Chile and Spain? Because that's what I see out there, and it doesn't feel like winning, to be honest. So I'll go ahead and say this. I do have optimism. I want to say it was the last Bourbon Talk. It might have been the one before that, but I think it was the last one. I think we're going to have some real conflict. And I'll be honest with you. I think that we've already seen bloodshed. We've already seen a lot of violence. We've already seen a lot of chaos. We've already seen a lot of oppression and cruelty. I think we're going to see more. And I think I think we're going to have some times that, as they used to say, that try the soul. I think that's true, and we already have. I mean, I'm sorry, we made it through 4 years of Donald Trump together. We did, and I'll say, like, not to go ahead and get a little sentimental, but it's like we've been doing Bourbon Talk for a while now. I want to say a year and a half. Been doing the Muckrake podcast for a year and a half, going on 2 years. I've been writing about this stuff since 2016. That's 5 years at this point. We've gone through some stuff together. We're going to go through more. That's just the truth. We really, really are. And I want to say thank you, first of all, for being there for me and being supportive and being kind. But we also need to steel ourselves for what's coming. And it's going to, I think, to go along with what I was saying earlier, I think there's probably going to be political maneuvering towards the type of thing like getting rid of Roe v. Wade, possibly going after some other legislation, some other rights, things like that. I think that the Republican Party and the people around them, they feel the blood's in the water. I mean, it's not a coincidence that you've got Tucker talking about Orbanism and the type of illiberal democracy that's going on in Hungary. It's not a coincidence that they're rallying around the types of ideas that Vladimir Putin pushes. It's not a coincidence that they're helping authoritarians around the world and that they have international structures in order to try and overturn liberal democracy. That's not an accident. That's what's coming. I think we'll beat them before they establish it. I do not think that we are going to live in that society. I think that we are going to address it and we're going to beat it before it takes root. I don't think it's going to take years and years and years. It might take years, but I don't think it's going to take root. I think we'll beat it as they try and make it happen. That's what I think. That's where I think this is going. I think that we will beat it and we'll keep it from being established. Maybe that's being sentimental. Maybe that's being hopeful, but that's what I think. Here's cheers to that. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to beating back authoritarianism. Cheers. I don't think it'll take root. I don't. I think there's a chance. That's not to give false hope. I'm not saying it'll be easy. I'm not saying it's written in stone. We could have a rightward turn. We've seen it happen in this country. We've seen mass oppression. We've seen the quote unquote arc towards justice get bent. But I don't think we're going to let that take root. I think we're going to rediscover something in ourselves. I think we're going to rediscover solidarity. I think we're going to rediscover purpose. I think that they've pushed too far. That's what I think. To go along with this, Hudson Valley Astrologer says, curious if you see a positive outcome from all of your work. For example, the tactics and maneuvers used by the GOP have of necessity come to the surface in the light of day. Don't you think things could get a whole lot worse if the right wasn't so desperate? Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that they are pushing because they have to push. They don't have any platform. They don't have any actual platform. They don't have any actual principles. The only thing they care about is power and profit. And at this point, people keep telling us, or telling me, I guess, to start a TikTok. I've never considered it, really. I don't know if I have the TikTok thing. I assume a 40-year-old guy talking about authoritarianism and history and politics. I don't know if I'd be welcome on TikTok. People keep telling me to do it. I don't know. People told me to do the Substack thing, and it's one of the best things that I've done. I don't know. I'm glad somebody brought that up. I appreciate that. I appreciate somebody bringing it up because it is a subject that has occurred. It has been brought up. I don't know what to do. The dog showed up. I don't know if people saw this. On the last episode of the Muckrake podcast that's on YouTube, the dog showed up to wish everybody a happy Hanukkah. I don't know if people know that. The dog was on my lap, wouldn't quit barking, had to bring her up. Happy Hanukkah, everybody. Thank you. I appreciate that, Julia. My Alex Jones impersonation is okay. I can't do many impersonations. I can do the Alex Jones. But yeah, to go along with what Hudson Valley was saying, it could get a whole lot worse in general. And I think that the fact that they are so desperate and the fact that they are pushing so hard is what makes this possible. The fact that they can be beaten, because the fact that they keep pushing and pushing and pushing, despite the fact that this stuff is so unpopular. Like, the consensus is so far against the Republican Party at this point, and they are so historically unpopular. That fact is what makes all of this so much more tenuous. If the Republican Party would just chill out and just continue to eat up at the judiciary and would keep going on with local, regional, and state elections, like, oh my God, they would run literally everything. But the fact that they're pushing and trying is they're making themselves vulnerable. Chris with Knowledge Fight. I used to listen to the Knowledge Fight. I didn't know that they still did it. I couldn't believe when somebody told me after we covered Alex Jones on the last episode. I couldn't believe that they were still going with chronicling Alex Jones. That's a great show. Knowledge Fight. Good stuff. Good stuff. The kids, the TikTok kids. Maybe they'd be into it. I don't know. All right, we got a handful of stuff. Just Jessica. This might be just in my head, but I feel like the dumb Patriot Front march was a recruiting effort. Wondering your thoughts on what the hell that was. Thanks again for doing these. Thanks for tuning in. For those who didn't pay attention, yesterday, Patriot Front, which is a white supremacist neo-fascistic group that I've had my eye on for a while, they believe what they're doing. Like, this is a really kind of a disturbing group of people who are not afraid to call themselves fascists. Like, they're not even crypto-fascists. They don't even hide this thing. They're very, very open about who they are. They marched through Washington, D.C. yesterday. And what I thought was kind of incredible was that it was like obviously a publicity stunt, but it kind of backfired because immediately all of the right-wing people were like, oh, they're feds. They're obviously federal agents. They turned on them so quickly. And they're not actually, they're like one of the few groups that I do not think is actually infiltrated with federal agents. Like, they are such a small, sort of a concentrated, cloistered group that I think that they have kept out federal intrusion, which you can't say for the Proud Boys, who more or less are federal informants and work hand in hand with federal authorities. The 3%ers are absolutely riddled with federal authorities. And I've talked about this before. The federal authorities, intelligence, and law enforcement, they work hand in glove with right-wing groups. And if you look at most of them, they share members, they work together, they share intelligence and goals. In this case, this group is like ideologically, quote unquote, pure to their own sort of beliefs. And they came out and they did this march. And they carried out all this like neo-fascistic iconography and all of that. And immediately, because of the way that they did it and the way they were escorted by authorities, people said immediately like they're filthy with feds, which isn't true. And it's really, really strange. But no, the Patriot Front people are frightening. And they're problematic. And one of the things that I keep trying to tell people is this. And that is, you don't need millions of people involved in this stuff. You just need a few. You just need a few who are willing to carry out their threats. Like when it comes to like January 6th, you just need people who are willing to go in there and shed some blood. You just need some people to go in there and occupy the area. You just need people who are willing to see the thing through. There were people at January 6th who were willing to. There are people who are going to be at the next January 6th who are willing to. It's a really, really screwed up thing because we have become so radicalized and we have become so atomized in that way that there are these groups who are more than willing to carry out the violence and the anti-democratic actions necessary to overthrow government and really mess things up. It's really messed up. We got two that are kind of together. Cranberry Sauce says, did you have a good Thanksgiving? Dr. Samru says, hey, how was your Thanksgiving? And did you encounter the dreaded marshmallow bedecked sweet potatoes? First of all, good Thanksgiving. I made a really good turkey and I made a good pie. I made a homemade chocolate pudding pie, which is my choice. If I had my druthers, it's a chocolate pudding pie. That's my favorite pie. Do it. Put it to bed. I was very, very happy with that. Happy with my turkey. Probably the best that I've ever cooked before. Did that. Watched some college basketball. That was very, very nice. Took the day off from work. It was the first day off from work that I've had in a really long time. Erica, that's happening. Me and Pete Dominic, sometime in the very near future, are going to do something where I teach him to make my chili. And hopefully it doesn't turn out bad, but I make good chili. So we'll see how that turns out. No marshmallow bedecked sweet potatoes. I think that's gross. I'm sorry. I do not like sweet potatoes with marshmallows. I don't get it. But Dr. Samuel says, penny for your thoughts regarding the Death Santa's plot for the civilian militia. Listen, in the past, these things have been done and they haven't been authoritarian and they haven't been dangerous. Ron DeSantis is staking his claim to the national conservative movement. He is very, very happy turning himself into what they believe is an American Caesar. Everything about this is about attacking federal authority. And all of the states are really, really pushing to take over that idea. They want so much to take the responsibility away from the federal government and move it onto the states. And at the very, very front of that is DeSantis. He loves that. Loves it. So yeah, it's really screwed up. It's a really terrible sign of the times, but that's what it is. Rich H. Hey, Jared. Hey, Rich. How's it going, man? Love all the content. Thank you. Appreciate that. Do you think that Gates, Marjorie Taylor Greene, et al. Actually believe what they're saying, or is it an act? Also, which episode of Breaking Bad did you teach as mentioned in a recent Friday episode? So I teach screenwriting. I taught the pilot episode of Breaking Bad, which I think is a really, really good example of a pilot episode. Introduces characters, immediately changes them, puts them in a matter of crisis. Really, really good. The pilot episode of Breaking Bad is more or less kind of a good little short film. I think it's a really, really good pilot episode. As far as Gates, I don't think Gates believes anything. I think Gates more or less is a nihilist. I don't think that there's literally anything that Matt Gates believes except for self-preservation. I think that's the one thing that Matt Gates believes in. I think that's it. I think that's the only thing that Matt Gates believes in. Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think, and this goes back to what we've talked about a lot on the podcast and a lot on this. There is, she's playing a role, right? She's a grifter, but doing so much of that, grifting and leaning into that. She wants to believe she's a revolutionary. She wants to believe that she's a crusader and a patriot. And I think so much of that, eventually you end up on the other side of it believing that that's what you are. I think that Marjorie Taylor Greene is on the other side. We talked about this on the Weekender about Alex Jones. You lose track of what you actually believe and who you are. And so Marjorie Taylor Greene has spent so much time, so much energy, and has based her identity so much around what she says that at this point, I bet she doesn't know the difference between the grift and reality anymore. I think that's where she is, unfortunately. Juxtaposed GOP, did Dems overdo the Russia investigation? I know the Senate committee published reports corroborating bad stuff, but was all that focus on Trump and Russia overdone? At times, it feels like Stop the Steal is a retaliatory reaction. So I think that's true that it is a retaliatory reaction. But I will say the problem on the Russia thing, and parts of the left want to pretend like this didn't happen. Donald Trump and the people around him collaborated with Russians. Like, that actually happened. He treated this like a corporate takeover in which you reach out and you find whoever will help you do it. So no, I don't think it was actually an overreaction. I think that the problem in a lot of this was that the media and politicians didn't know how to talk about this. It might not have been quote unquote treason. It was near treason. It was really, really problematic what Trump did. And it was really indicative of where the right is going, which is they don't give a shit about patriotism or country or duty. It's whatever they can do to push themselves. In this case, Donald Trump saw the ability to gain power and profit and influence by engaging with foreign enemies in order to help himself. So that's something you have to talk about. It's not good, and it's something that we should talk about. It just so happens that our culture is so screwed up that nobody did anything about it. And there were no consequences because it exposed that all of this is just an absolute construct. And you're right. Teresa just said the only loyalty is their own power grab. That's the only thing Trump cares about is his ability to get ahead and gain and profit. So no, I think it was that big of a deal. I think it actually was a big deal. It just so happens that our accelerated culture and our own culture of self-interest sort of neutralized that whole thing. I think it was a really, really giant deal, actually. All right, we got 3 more. Heather S., weird question, but after listening to your podcast about Alex Jones and Jake Ducey and that business, I wondered what you think about the state of the universe. Is this the Matrix or a simulation, or is there such a thing as the law of attraction? All right, so 1, I think that it is really convincing what people say about the idea that this is a simulation. The idea that mathematically it is more possible that this is a simulation than not. I find that pretty compelling. But at the end of the day, even if this is a simulation, what's that change? Right? At that point, we're all of a sudden talking semantics. What is the one true reality? What are the rest of the simulations? And the truth is, who cares? Right? If this is a simulation, if it feels real, your life is real, all that stuff, that's what matters. Right? And it's not like you're just going to get booted out of the Matrix or whatever. So here you are, you're in this simulation, you're in this reality. What are you going to do with it? And I think those decisions, those existential ideas are the ones that really matter. What do you do with it, regardless of if it's a simulation or not? I don't think that we're plugged into a matrix. I don't think that computers are using us as batteries. I think that was I wrote about this in American Rule. I think that was a really interesting metaphor for the coming influence of the internet and sort of digitized reality and mass consumerism and capitalism. I think that's what that was actually about. In terms of law of attraction, I think there's something interesting happening with that. I do not think that it's what Jake Ducey and other grifters talk about, which is if you meditate on something, you get it. I think that's horseshit. And that's the kind of thing, of course, that Trump believes, Norman Vincent Peale believes, all of that. I will say, though, that it feels like whatever the algorithms are, and I've said this outside of the Bourbon Talk or podcast before. I'll say this very, very quickly, and we don't have to get very deep in it, but we can have further conversations later. I think it's where, on a social media, all of a sudden you'll go look at somebody's profile or something, and then all of a sudden you'll hear from them, or you'll get a friend request or something like that. The algorithms that connect us via these sort of invisible wires, right? I think the same sort of thing happens in the real world, and I don't know what that means, but it reminds me back in the day where my grandmother would know who was calling before caller IDs, right? She would hear the phone and she'd be like, oh, that's my daughter. That's obviously who that is. I don't know. I think there's something strange there, but that isn't even necessarily technological. It's not simulation-wise. So the entire answer is that I don't know the question, I don't know the answer, but I'm also kind of okay with it. I'm kind of okay not knowing the answer to it. I know what I don't believe, and I know what I don't know, and I'm okay with that. I appreciate that question. All right, 2 questions. Nola. How do we get the Biden administration to see the urgent need for equal counter messaging with truth and engaging format as soon as possible with every disinformation platform, including AM radio, as well as develop a Department of Ethics and Educational Defense? I got to tell you the truth. I don't see that happening with this administration. I've watched this for long enough. I have watched the Democratic Party for long enough. I don't know if there's any way to convince them of that, and I know that that's rough, and I know that that isn't what you want to hear, but I also don't want to lie to you. This is like whenever somebody asks a question, they're like, when is Donald Trump going to prison? And I say, I don't think that he is. I don't think that someone like a Trump is going to be held responsible. I don't think that the administration is going to go after a former president, because you don't want all of a sudden former presidents being held responsible for what they did. In this case, I don't know how to tell you how to make the Biden administration care about things that are very, very obvious. I don't know how you make the Senate go ahead and move beyond the filibuster. I don't know how you make them care about voting rights or think that they need to do something about voting rights. I don't know how you go ahead and tell them to crystallize a woman's right to choose before the Supreme Court does something about it. And I think in this case that there isn't a way to really talk to them about how to counter this stuff, or really, I think Biden has come out and said, that we're facing some of the larger issues since the Civil War or civil rights, which I think is true. But I don't know how to let them know or communicate or tell them, this is like a bigger situation than maybe you even think, or maybe you even consider. I've talked to people within the Biden administration. I've talked to people within the Democratic Party. Some of them get it, some of them don't. Others are not interested in changing the status quo. They don't want to upset what the world is and how it works. There's a certain sort of a class solidarity there, right? They don't want to make big major changes because it would, throw their own political, economic, and social power in flux. So the answer, unfortunately, is I don't think you can. But if that is something you care about, and it should be, if you want people who take this thing seriously and take your right to vote seriously and your autonomy over your body and your life seriously, vote for people who will. Find the people who will care about that. Go out and find those people, make them run for office, vote for them, work for them. In this case, we have to start finding others who will do this job. I think Biden does what he does. I think he is good in certain parts, and in other parts he is willfully ignorant and inactive. But you got to find the people who care about these things. You got to find the people who actually do get this stuff. And, I've said this before when it comes to like Manchin and Sinema, you're not going to talk to them. There's nothing you could possibly say. If you got caught in an elevator with them that didn't work and you had hours with them, there's nothing you could say to make them do something or to break the filibuster. We have to find other people. We have to find other means. That's simply the truth. All right, last one. Tammy F., what's your favorite Christmas movie? It's one or two. There's a competition between two. One is National Lampoon's Christmas, which is the movie I've probably seen more than any other movie ever. That's because it's my family's tradition to see it. I saw it in movie theaters. We watch it every single Christmas. Every time I watch it, I find new things to enjoy. Currently, my favorite thing is either the neighbors next door who have to put up with the Griswolds, or the quiet little in-laws who come over. I sort of enjoy both. Those are nice. The second, because, when you watch National Lampoon's Christmas, originally what you laugh at is Cousin Eddie, who is still very, very funny. But the neighbors are very funny to me right now. I love their reaction. Julia Louis-Dreyfus is real nice in that. Then the other that goes along, and in part it's because I am a Hoosier and this takes place in Indiana, Christmas Story. I think Christmas Story is fantastic. I think it's very, very funny, very, very iconic. So I still enjoy Christmas Story. I still watch it constantly. Of course, there's all kinds of other things. Animation-wise is probably Rudolph or Frosty. Santa Claus is coming to town. It's kind of messed up. I don't know. It's not the best of all of them. If I had to put my money down on one, it's probably Rudolph. That's probably the one. Although Peanuts is really good too. Elf is good too. Elf is really, really good. I haven't seen The Ref in a long time. I need to watch that too. But this was really, really nice. I appreciate you coming out. We're going to come back on the 19th. Yes, Eyes Wide Shut is absolutely a Christmas movie. Yes, I will toast to that. Eyes Wide Shut is absolutely a Christmas movie, and which is just absolutely a fantastic accompaniment in the age of QAnon. Love it. Love it. I like Eyes Wide Shut quite a bit. I haven't watched that in forever. That is absolutely a Christmas movie. All right, so we're going to come back on December 19th. That will be the last Bourbon Talk of 2021. My God, what a year that we've had. What a lot of fights that we've had, wins, losses. We'll go over those wins, losses. We'll console one another. We'll talk about what to expect in 2022, which undoubtedly is going to... I might have bourbon and eggnog. It's not a bad suggestion from Kevin. God, I love eggnog. I've even got the National Lampoon's Wally Moose. Guys, maybe we'll do those. But I appreciate you. I really, truly do. I missed doing this a couple of weeks ago. Again, I've just been absolutely swamped trying to get this book done. I appreciate you every single time. I, honest to God, have hope, and I am optimistic. I think we're going to win this thing. Let me pour a little bit more so we can have a good, proper toast. Again, this week, I think on the Muckrake podcast, we're going to have Chauncey DeVega, who is always a fan favorite, always tells it like it is, one of my favorite guys out there. We'll have a weekender. It comes out on Friday. You can get that at patreon.com/Muckrake podcast. I'll write about something on Substack. Thank you again for telling me to go and do the Substack. It's been a godsend in terms of getting stuff out there. You are the best. You keep me going. You give me energy. You give me hope. I mean that. Here is to defeating fascism and authoritarianism, keeping the fight going. Cheers. All right, everybody. Be good. Be safe.